If you're pulling weeds every week, you might actually be helping them come back. But there's a much simpler method you should try instead.
Stop pulling weeds. Do this instead. Every weekend, in gardens all over the world, the same ritual repeats itself. A gardener kneels down, grabs a fistful of green intruders, and pulls. The soil loosens, the roots snap free, and for a moment, the bed looks clean. Satisfying, right? But what almost nobody realizes is this. The very act they rely on to control their garden might be the exact reason. The weeds keep coming back faster and thicker than before. And stranger still, the method that has been used for generations to fix this problem is not the one most people reach for first. This is the story of why pulling weeds rarely solves anything long-term, and what actually works instead. Part 1. Why do weeds keep coming back? It starts the same way every time. A weed appears, someone pulls it out, and the bed looks tidy for a while. Then, just days or weeks later, new sprouts appear in almost the exact same spot. It can feel like the weeds are mocking the effort, growing back stronger out of spite. But there is no mystery here, no stubborn plant intelligence at work. The explanation is simple and almost entirely invisible to the eye. Beneath the surface of most garden soil lies something gardeners rarely think about: a seed bank. Thousands, sometimes millions, of dormant weed seeds are sitting quietly in the top few inches of soil, waiting for the right conditions to wake up. Alongside them are root fragments left behind from previous weeds, small pieces that were never fully removed, still capable of resprouting into a full plant. So when a weed is pulled, the visible problem disappears, but the underlying supply never runs out. It is less like defeating an enemy and more like mowing the tip of an iceberg. This is the trap so many gardeners fall into. They treat the symptom over and over without ever addressing what continues to fuel it below the surface. Part 2. Where does the real problem actually lie? To understand why weeds return with such persistence, it helps to think about what a weed actually needs to survive. Like any plant, it needs light, air, moisture, and space. Bare soil, exposed, sun-drenched, and open is exactly the environment that satisfies all four of these needs at once. It is, in a very real sense, an open invitation. Every time a patch of ground is cleared, whether by pulling weeds or by any other means, that patch becomes bare soil again. Sunlight pours directly onto it, and sunlight is often the single trigger that many dormant seeds are waiting for. The moment light reaches them, germination can begin. Add in the fact that most gardens are watered regularly, and rain falls on top of that. And now those newly triggered seeds have the moisture they need too. It is, unintentionally, the perfect setup for a new generation of weeds to sprout almost immediately. So the real issue was never really about the individual weeds themselves. It was about the environment being created every time the ground was left bare. Pulling weeds without changing that environment is a bit like sweeping a floor in a room with a hole in the roof. The mess returns because the source was never addressed. But here's the real key. If bare soil is the invitation, then the solution is not to fight harder. It is to stop sending the invitation in the first place. Part 3. The alternative method, covering the soil. Instead of treating each weed as an isolated battle, a different strategy focuses on changing the conditions of the soil itself. This approach is known as mulching, and its logic is refreshingly simple. If weeds need light to germinate and thrive, then blocking that light removes their ability to grow in the first place. Mulching involves covering the surface of the soil with a protective layer of organic material. This can take many forms: shredded leaves, straw, bark chips, compost, or other suitable garden materials. The exact material matters less than the principle behind it. The goal is to create a barrier between the sun and the soil, one that most weed seeds simply cannot push through. When a layer of mulch is applied correctly, several things happen at once. Sunlight is blocked from reaching the seeds resting just below the surface, so many of them never receive the trigger they need to germinate. Any seeds that do manage to sprout underneath the mulch often struggle to reach daylight before running out of stored energy. Meanwhile, the mulch layer also helps retain soil moisture, moderate temperature swings, and slowly break down to enrich the soil over time. In other words, mulching does not just suppress weeds, it actively improves the health of the garden bed while doing so. This is the shift in thinking that changes everything. Instead of reacting to weeds after they appear, the gardener gets ahead of the problem by making the soil inhospitable to them from the start. Part 4. The most important detail most people miss. Here is where many well-intentioned gardeners go wrong. They hear about mulching, grab a bag of material, and scatter it across the bed without much thought, and then wonder why weeds still manage to push through weeks later. The truth is that mulching only works when it is done with a bit of care and precision. The first step, often skipped, is clearing out any existing large weeds before laying down mulch. Covering established weeds does very little. Many of them are already rooted deeply enough, or resilient enough, to push straight through a thin covering. Starting with a relatively clean surface gives the mulch a real chance to do its job. The second detail is thickness. A thin, scattered layer of mulch is more decorative than functional. Light can still filter through gaps, and seeds can still find enough exposure to germinate. For mulch to effectively block light and suppress weed growth, it generally needs to be applied at a meaningful depth, forming a continuous barrier rather than a patchy scattering. The third detail, often overlooked, concerns the plants that are meant to be protected. Mulch should never be piled directly against the stems or trunks of garden plants. Doing so can trap excess moisture against the plant tissue, inviting rot, disease, or pest problems. A small gap between the mulch and each plant's base allows for airflow and keeps the plant healthy, while still gaining the weed-suppressing benefits around it. Get these 3 details right. Clear first, apply thick enough, and keep it away from stems, and the entire strategy becomes dramatically more effective. Part 5. A detail that might change how you see gardening. There is a quiet but powerful idea hiding inside all of this, one that reframes what it even means to be good at gardening. The best gardener is not the one who spends the most hours on their knees, yanking out weed after weed with visible determination. That image, as admirable as the effort looks, is often a sign that the underlying conditions were never addressed. The best gardener is the one who makes it difficult for weeds to appear in the first place. This is not about achieving some instant magical transformation. Mulching does not eliminate every single weed forever after one application. Some persistent weeds will still find a way through, especially in the first season. What mulching actually does is reduce the frequency and intensity of the problem over time. Fewer seeds germinate. Fewer root fragments resprout unchecked. The soil itself becomes less hospitable to unwanted growth, season after season. It is a shift from a constant, exhausting battle to a slow, steady advantage. Instead of fighting the same fight every week, the effort is invested once, thoughtfully, and the garden continues to benefit from it for months at a time. Final part, bringing it all together. So, back to the question that opened this story. If pulling weeds isn't the long-term fix everyone assumes it to be, what should be done instead? The answer lies not in fighting harder, but in changing the conditions that allow weeds to thrive in the first place. Covering bare soil with a proper layer of mulch blocks the sunlight that so many weed seeds depend on, retaining moisture and moderating the soil environment. Supports the plants that are actually wanted, while making life harder for the ones that are not. Reducing the amount of exposed, bare ground, the single biggest invitation for new weeds, removes the root cause rather than just its symptoms. And maintaining this approach consistently, rather than treating it as a one-time fix, is what turns a temporary improvement into a lasting change. The next time weeding day comes around, there's a different approach worth trying. Instead of reaching straight for the trowel, consider reaching for the mulch instead. Clear what needs to be cleared, cover what needs to be covered, and let the soil itself do the work of keeping the weeds away, season after season.